Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com with the program called What's Going On? And we know what's going on, and we hope that by the time the program comes to a close that you'll know what's going on. Well, our viewers already know what's going on because they stay up with the latest events. We are coming to you on the third Monday of the month, and next week, since it'll be the fourth Mondays, we have Sartorius Black History Corner here with us the second and fourth Mondays. So they'll be here next week in the studio, and we will be staying around for that program once this program airs. This program is taped every Monday from 2 o'clock to 3. Hope you can join us live, and sometimes you can call in, or at your leisure call in. If not, pick us up at your leisure on YouTube. And we are sitting there with all of our countenance, waiting for you to tune us in, pick our numbers up, and let us know that you're paying attention to what we do here at allpointstv.com. And we are working hard, as always, to do something of interest here and keep you informed. And you can help us with that by helping us with keeping us informed, and then we keep you informed again. Just keep on tumbling over until we all informed about all things.
Well, that's why, I like that. Some people, I've got friends who are on the political left, and, most people, if they do it right, they could actually convince people that the position might have some merit to it. But, most of the time, the people on the left just attack. And it's name-calling is a big thing amongst leftists.
Yes.
I see that all the time. You're stupid. You're ignorant. Well, no, I disagree with you. Doesn't mean I'm ignorant. I know what you're thinking. I just don't agree with it.
Yeah.
I love that. You're ignorant.
John, I read that all the time.
That's like another thing. You're ignorant. I'm going to. I've actually had these guys from the union say, "We're going to educate you." Oh, you're going to educate me in a bygone era. Gee, where the unions lost your power.
That is interesting.
And it's like, you guys actually, because let's face it, the more demand you put on General Motors or any other employer, they don't want to put. They're in there to make money. They're not in there to take care of employees. They see, and people think that's exactly what they're going to teach you something. Then they'll just engage in name calling. I'm going to shut people off and engage in name calling. I'll just, you sit there and babble to yourself. I'm just going to go and live my life. Mm-hmm. But it's like, I'm going to teach you something. That's an arrogance. I always thought that
I see that all the time. And I had that situation this past weekend. I was over to a friend's house watching a tape by Stefan Melano. And he had as his guest Gerard Taylor, who wrote the book called Paid with Good Intentions and some other books. He's over the American Renaissance, and they were having a very loud discussion about race. And my friend wanted me to come over and watch it with him. He's going to show me where my errors were in terms of my agreement with what they were saying, because I agree with everything in that tape. So my friend was going to invite me over, because he had met with another person, and they had watched it, and the other guy that watched it with him apparently stormed out and said, "I can't watch this," and then left. So he's going to call me back over there and call me over to his house, and he's going to watch it and show me where he and his friend agreed with each other that what they were saying in the tape was wrong, and they're going to show me the errors of my ways. Invite me over there, and so we stopped the tape every so often. He would stop the tape. And then he would comment about what he disagreed with. The only problem was he was disagreeing with the things that was not said in the tape. He couldn't even interpret what they were saying, but he disagreed with it because it didn't sound right. And so a lot of liberals are that way. It doesn't sound to be true.
I have this book. It's called "In Vain We Will Go." In vain. It's in vain, weighing in and by William F. Buckley, and he's talking about Shelley Winters, and he said one time about Shelley Winters, the actress, and she was also a personal friend of Marilyn Monroe. They had roommates. I don't know if you knew that, but anyway, she goes. Miss Winters went on to say that she doesn't know much about politics, and then went on for the next 15 minutes fully demonstrating that. And she did. So basically, she was saying, "I don't know much about politics." You know how people say that? It's trying to buffer. They're trying to lead in. Yeah, she demonstrated she didn't know much about it. Damn if she didn't do that. Yeah.
I used to have this thing where I would say, you have to stop talking, because I want to continue to believe that you're intelligent, but you're talking now. So you're eliminating the authority upon which I base that, which is your silence.
But you know what? The thing is, the thing is, it's not right or wrong so much as basically the left wants you to live your life where you look to your neighbor and say, "What do you need from me?" And I just see that as, okay, but at what point can you expect something in return from them if you're going to do that? See, so it's not really wrong to want to help your neighbor. Okay, it really isn't. But the biggest thing about the left, and I see it, they don't want to take care of somebody else themselves. They want to force you to do it because it weighs on their conscience.
They're very bad about that.
They don't write a check on their own. They don't go to their neighbors and mow that lawn or do the yard work or whatever, or take the dog for a walk or do the laundry for the old couple. They want to pay somebody else to do it, and they want to take your money to give that so they can feel they can go around election time saying, "Look what we did for you." So that's the reason everything they do is calculated to actually eventually serve their own interest, but rather than actually just doing it for something in and of itself being good.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference between the right and the left. I mean, and they always try to use Christian principles to go after people who don't want to wait, for more welfare and stuff. Well, it's like, if it weren't for Christianity in the first place, saying love thy neighbor as thyself, where would you gotten the idea? Or even the corrupted form that I see you guys operate under, where would you gotten it,
John, you remember that conversation that Obama had with Joe DePlummer back there in 2008?
Yeah.
Remember that? He was telling Joe DePlummer that we're going to take your money from you. And when Joe DePlummer wasn't too happy about it, he tells Joe DePlummer, "But Joe, that's a charitable thing to do." Yeah, it would be if it's your money and you want to donate it. What Joe DePlummer was objecting to, he wasn't objecting to that. What Joe DePlummer was objecting to is what Amity Shlaes is talking about in a book called The Forgotten Man. And somebody ought to read that first chapter of that book, because she makes this analogy. It comes out of a philosopher named William Graham Sumner, who was in the 19th century from Yale University, and he had put this analogy together of that A sees a problem that C is having, and so A goes and talks to B about the problem, and the A and B decide that we got to do something about this problem because C's got a problem over here. So they then we have them enlisting A, B, and D to resolve the problem. Now, what Graham was trying to show is that A and B trying to do something for C is fine. But what A and B did in fixing the problem is that they enlisted D in the solution to the problem, and D had not, in fact, consented to be enlisted. But they want to enlist him in the problem because they want to resolve this problem. And that's what politicians do. They enlist the taxpayers in the solving of problems that they want to solve. And that's fine if they go in their own pockets to do so. But Obama couldn't understand that, and we should have put up a flag at that time, because that was an ominous sign of who we were actually elected. But we looked at a lot of these signs, and we just went on to vote for him anyway because we wanted to believe. We wanted to believe, even though the evidence was such that we should have had some red flags going up saying, wait, that's a problem. And then Jeremiah Ray's church, that was a problem. But when he got in there, that's what we saw. We saw all this charitable impulse coming out, and then enlisting D to pay for it. So we are now got all the immigrants coming in here. Let's not have any borders. You know what happened? If they had those open borders and those persons were coming in and staying in their basement, and you kept them away from the public purse, I can guarantee you right now the borders would be closed like last Tuesday.
Well, see, the thing is, all this reminds me of is, like, I think I've said this joke to you before. It's like a couple in front of divorce court, and the judge says, at the end of it, he goes, "I award your wife, $300 a week and other expenses to be paid." And the guy goes, "That's mighty nice of you." So the guy, the soon-to-be divorced husband, he goes, "And when I can, I'll chip in once in a while too." So it's like, he didn't understand it was supposed to be him that provided that, but or didn't want to understand that. But it's exactly what leftists do. It's like, okay. And they do make a valid point. I'd rather see, for things being, we could actually change things. I'd rather see the money being spent domestically. I think it's ridiculous to give Israel $11 million per day for a country that's got less than 6 million people in that entire country. Mm-hmm. $11 million per day. You figure that out. You're pretty good at math. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money. Yeah. And I hate when I say this. Well, yeah, it's just a drop in the bucket. No, it's not. No, it's not. I mean, gee thanks. Just think about the problem here in Flint with the water problem.
Yeah, it's $3,650,000,000.
How much?
$3 billion.
Yeah, $3 billion. See, okay, so we give Israel 1 year could take care of the problems here in Michigan. Could largely Southeast Michigan. It could take part. Well, we give 1 year to Israel. Where is the rate of return we're going to get for giving to Israel? That money is down a tube, especially when the Arabs eventually take over the country, because they're all producing. They're having more kids. Okay, so it's a diminishing return scenario. Okay, if you want to look at it that way. So if you just use that for example, and the reason why I do, it's the one that gets the most amount of money. They get more money. We give money to the Palestinian Authority to try to offset that we're giving money to the Jews, and back and forth. So we never end. That's all Americans are is in harness to support a bunch of foreigners and foreign interest without even. And then they want to tax us more for the things we have domestically going on. We cannot support the world. We can't. It's simply the Alice Shrug scenario.
Can't do it now. Not with a $28 trillion deficit. And it's going to be more than that when, by the time Obama leaves office. I feel like, doing that little kiss and then knocking on wood when that occurs. That's going to be on the 20th of January 2017. That can't come too quickly. But everybody's charitable if they can be charitable with somebody else's money. They're not quite as charitable when they're doing when their own money has to be kicked in. And that's one of the problems that we have with these politicians. They want to solve all the problems of the world, but they want to solve the problems on the taxpayers' back. If it came out of their own pockets, and that's when we look at these, particularly the Democrats, when we look at these Democrats who always talk about what they want to do with programs, help the poor, help the oppressed, give us a whole masses yearning to breathe free. When it comes down to people breathing free based upon their dimes opposed to the taxpayers' dime, not so much freedom. And it's one thing to enlist your neighbor and force him at gunpoint to contribute. I look at these politicians, for example, and they talk about the minimum wage. We're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, they're not hiring anybody. They don't have anybody working for them in the private quarter. Any person's hired to work underneath them, that goes to the taxpayers' coffers, and they have to pay that along with the salary of the politician. None of that money comes from them, and they don't even pay taxes because they find some way to avoid it because they write the tax laws. So they talk about we're going to make sure everybody gets a living wage, and they raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And they take all the bows in the world as if they're putting that money on the table and the person's paying it because the politician made it available. Next thing you know, you go to a restaurant like the one over here on this main thoroughfare in Flint, and you go in there and they got a kiosk on the table, and they got one waiter in the corridor where they're being waited on in that area. One waiter. They got the kiosk on the table, and once they bring you your meal, they can go and take care of other customers. And when you get ready to pay for the bill, you don't need the waiter involved. They cut that person out, and they cut some of the waiters out because she can do other things now because they don't have to do one table and then take care of all the things at one table. You pay your own bill at the table, and once all the person at the table pay for it, then the light that's red when you're there, unless all the persons pay, the light stays on red. Once everybody pays at the table, then the light goes on green. Then that table is clear. And you walk up and leave out the restaurant. Put the tip on there. They pick it up later. So it eliminates that. Well, what happened to that other person? The other person was eliminated through the benevolence of the politicians. They were so good that what they did is take a person. This is how benevolent they are. Take a person who had a job, and then they allow him to retire, and he's not yet had any years built in to build his retirement up, so he's unemployed. That's the kind of charity they involved in. And that's a charity we see all over the country.
Did you ever see the quote from Buckminster Fuller? Said basically, those who are really rich, the producing class, I guess it is, in Ayn Rand speak, I guess, it can actually be taxed enough to actually support the rest of us. So we can have our pursuits, become like doctors or, educated in art and all this stuff, perhaps different pursuits. Noble sounding, but okay, if you taxed everybody who was producers, I mean, all the wealth of, say, Gates and Oprah Winfrey and all these other people, you just taxed them everything they had, 90% to 99%. Maybe let them keep a couple of their mansions, okay? What you still, I mean, you got a growing population here now who's never done anything and have this expectations, and as things go along the course, they will expect more. Or at least to maintain, even while the maintaining of what they had at one level still is going to go up. Mm-hmm. Even though there's no demands being put on it for now labor because nobody's working. I just don't see how, I mean, I don't see how such a brilliant man as Buckminster Fuller could actually imagine that and think it's a viable, operational thing. I don't see all that. And he was great with the design and stuff, so not questioning his design. I just see that, I think he forgets how human nature functions.
That's what they do forget, and they also forget history in terms of what has happened in the past. It's amazing. I think this is, who was the writer that made the point that it is amazing they're still trying this. Elder made this point. Larry Elder made this point in one of his recent articles, and that was the point that it's amazing that people still try to bring about some socialist result as if the utopia is going to prevail this time after having failed in all the other instances, but this time it's going to work out just swell. But the past has been tried, it's failed in every other case, and there are no indications that it has even come remotely closer to working. Anytime socialism is work, as a matter of fact, it's worked because at the beginning because it works on the tail end of capitalism, and it spends the rest of the input that capitalism produced, and then when the incentives have been totally destroyed, you have the production that they expect to kick in with socialism, but it never kicks in because nobody is incentivized to produce anything if the state is going to confiscate it and use it so that everybody has what was produced. I mean, what would be the incentive for producing if what's being produced is being disseminated and distributed to those who produce nothing? Why don't you then join the other part of that, and that is stop producing and get the benefit.
That's a strike.
And that's what...
they call that the strike. Remember that in Ayn Rand's? That's the original thing for Atlas Shrugged.
That's right.
The strike.
Yeah.
It's where the producer said, okay, you're going to take our businesses away from us and tell us micromanage them? Bye. We're gone. And the very people who put the time and energy into it and had their... And I hate using that term, but they had the vision for it initially. They walked away from it, remember? In the
yes, that's
exactly what's going to happen.
Who's John Galt?
Yeah. Boom. It's going to be... It's like... Because let's face it. It is ego that keeps people going on this. Bill Gates, even though he's like a leftist, if somebody else would try to say they did this, he'd be screaming bloody murder that he was the one who was like, who came across this or developed this or, created that. He still wants ownership, okay? Even though he allows government to take or willing to donate money, he still wants ownership. He still wants to be considered the creative brain behind that because it is part of your ego.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't understand. Everybody else is you're being enslaved. I don't want to see how people think that's any other terms, but when they put this burden on people who are trying to produce for themselves and their families, to pull the weight of people who don't even try to make that attempt, then that's slavery. I don't see how that can be looked at any other way.
Our forefathers in this, 47 years ago, when Lincoln gave that speech November the 19th, 1863, he said, 47 years ago, our fathers brought forth for this continent a new nation conceived in liberty. The liberty he was talking about wasn't just political liberty, it was also economic liberty. If you don't have economic liberty, which is the right to own property and be free from the confiscatory power of the state to take property from you, then you don't have liberty. And so this idea of bringing forth a new nation, it was also to bring a nation forth that was born in liberty. And the liberty was to keep the federal government away from the purse of the taxpayers, and that's why they were not allowed to tax. There was no federal tax that was in the Constitution when the framers drew that document up in 1787 and ratified it a year later, nor did they put anything in there after having seen how it operated from the time that the Revolutionary War started in 1776 up until the time that they brought about the ratification of the Bill of Rights in 1791. There was nothing in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments that they amended the Constitution. There was still nothing in it where they had seen that, well, maybe we need to give the federal government more money so it could do more things. They still did not put in there provision for the federal government to be able to confiscate the wealth of the citizens and reach into their pockets and tax them and tax their wealth away, so the state then begins to confiscate it. That was not allowed in the Constitution, and we didn't have that until the 16th Amendment in 1913. Because the founders knew the federal government could get out of control if it had the right to tax. And if you are going to be charitable, in fact, James Madison said when they were trying to use the treasury that they had to pay for humanitarian, you always want to say this, humanitarian purposes, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, said that I failed to be able to see where the Constitution allows for the public purse to be used to do the benevolence that we're talking about in this chamber, because James Madison by that time was in the House of Representatives, and there is no provision for it. And they could not do it to the extent they were doing it. They're doing it now because they didn't have access to the federal government have access to federal tax on the part of the citizens. The only way they could actually raise money on the federal level was to raise it on imports. They could not even tax exports. Goods that were produced in this country were not taxed because you were going to tax production. And this is the kind of foresight that our framers had, and we gave all that up as if they had not thought these things through. And they had thought it through. And what was working, as long as we kept that into the economic mix, this country was in fact the greatest economic engine the world had ever seen. Because if a person can produce and then get the benefit of that which he or she produces, then those persons that's in the productive realm are incentivized to produce. And the reason for that, of course, is that you're incentivized to work if you can work for yourself, and you can, in fact, enjoy the accoutrements of that which you produce and the benefits of your own effort. Why wouldn't you produce if you can benefit from it? And that's what was the laissez-faire aspect to the economy. Government hands off. That means government don't take that which is produced and then confiscate and put it in the storehouse of the state. And by not doing that and having government hands off, then the people are going into their garages, going to their basements, producing things, trying to experiment in order to get money, because they knew that whatever they produced would be theirs because they're the ones that put forth the productive effort. Once you take that away, then you got Venezuela. Venezuela came in. I mean, everybody went down, when Hugo Chavez died, everybody went down to his funeral. I mean, they had Jesse Jackson down there. They had Sean Penn down there. Danny Glover went down. You know, Michael Moore had to be down there. They had to go down there and witness to the iconic Hugo Chavez having left. But he left right ahead of the collapse because he inherited the production that where the incentives were in place. But months later, when Nicolas Maduro took over down there, then what happened? Then the socialist system kicked in, and now it has to pick up from where the capitalist system left off, and now it's got to produce based upon the incentives that they provided there, and there are no incentives. The state, in fact, confiscates the production, distributes to those, you know how you say, to each according to his needs, from each according to his ability. So now everybody's leg is broke because nobody can do anything. And you're down in Venezuela with this idea. Nicolas Maduro, who was just a bus driver, he didn't understand anything about economics. And he's another failed politician, and now the state has failed because it's under politicians. You know, I got to tell you something. I'm working on a 2-part series right now on my Facebook wall, and I'm working on something that nobody's working on. I try to work on something that is not regurgitating the same things that everybody else is saying. I try to get some new ways of looking at old ways. You know, I look at old things and see what's wrong with it, and try to put some other things in the mix to see if we can kind of get more of a comprehension about what it is that we're doing and what we're saying. Because a lot of what we're saying, what we're doing is fundamentally unsound, particularly in the arena of race. I'm getting ready to put together. I did part one day. I didn't want to do two parts, do it all in one session. It would be too long. And I'm oftentimes criticized for writing very long narratives. So I broke this up into two parts. And what I said in the first part is that America doesn't have a racism problem. That's a total scam. And if we do have a racism problem, then why is it that the only ones that know about it are those on the left? Nobody in America knows it. And that's why Obama has to tell them. If you look at how this president operates, he is constantly telling people the situation is racist. And yet, when I went back through all the public cases, the ones everybody is fawning over, and everyone's out in the street, and all, Black Lives Matter. It didn't matter in Chicago, it didn't matter in Detroit, it doesn't matter in Cleveland and Philadelphia and these inner cities. You go and look at the inner cities, every one of the top 10, that's where they have all this killing going on.
Now, I'm going to say,
and there no demonstrations over there.
I'm going to say this. It's like, it really matters when the person you could try to hold responsible for the death has deep pockets. When it's somebody in your own neighborhood who kills your kid, well, it's bad. You want to see them go to prison, but it's not as crucial to complain about it because they don't have. I'm sorry. That's the only way I can see it. Because why don't they talk about the crimes going on in their own neighborhood amongst their own within the people in their own neighborhoods? Mm-hmm. No. It's the cops who are killing everybody. Well, they've already shown that more whites die each year at the hands of cops than blacks. Mm-hmm. And then they say, well, then you add the fact that it's a majority population's white, blacks are still getting killed out at a disproportionate rate. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's got to be adjusted too. Where are they being patrolled at? Guess what? My area, if you got an area of town that's known to be black or known to be white, the people who are committing crimes or getting pulled over for traffic offenses are probably going to be, drumroll, with the people of that ethnic group who are predominant in that area. So, it's like, I don't understand. Then they say, well, there shouldn't be. Then they say, well, there shouldn't be no areas. Everybody, and that's people do that. People live amongst them, people who are like themselves. They feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
You got ethnic communities and ethnic pockets of neighborhoods everywhere on the planet. But when it happens here, it's considered racist or xenophobic. But everybody else seems to want to be around people of their own kind. Mm-hmm. But
no question about it. The only ones that people object to is when whites demand the right to be with other whites, and then that's a problem. As long as other groups are clinging to each other. For example, they say Black Lives Matter. Now, if whites said White Lives Matter, that's racist. But when blacks say Black Lives Matter, that's not racist. And you can't even say, after they say Black Lives Matter, you can't even say all lives matter. So Black Lives Matter is not racist. Saying all lives matter, that's racist. And you just have a skewered conversation about race. In fact, what you really have is a non-conversation about race. Because you cannot have a conversation about race until you first of all start off with the statistical data. You have to start off with the facts. And that's what happened, quite frankly, with what happened with this black professor at Harvard University. He set out to prove that the public discourse was right. Blacks are being shot down unfairly, disproportionately, by police, and the reason why it is true is because of race. And that's what he set out to prove. He said, I'm not a demonstration guy, I'm a data guy. I'm going to out here use the data, I'm going to show this to be true. But as he began to study the data, he began to have his mouth open, jaw-dropping, because the data was indicating something different, 180 degrees different than what the demonstrators were saying was true. That is, they have to be answering Black Lives Matter based upon a claim that Black lives don't matter. Now, whoever said that, Nobody's ever identified that person. But I will make this point on the QT and running, and that is this: if nobody has made the claim that black lives don't matter, then Black Lives Matter, which is being put up there when the claim has not been made otherwise, that makes Black Lives Matter racist. Because you see, if you are making a claim of that and nobody's made a counterclaim that you are responding to, then the claim being exclusionary makes the claim racist. I don't know if people understand that they're saying Black Lives Matter, but they're answering a non-claim. See what they're doing? They're acting like somebody's claimed otherwise, and nobody's claimed otherwise. I had that happen to me yesterday in another way. I was on a wall. I go on a couple of walls of people where they're going to have a lively conversation. And I went on this one wall, and the guy said, first of all, I went on the wall and said, told this one guy, I won't call his name out on the air, but I told him that I can see you're still stupid. And he said, oh, you're back. The alcoholic mouse is back. So I told him, I'm not an alcoholic. Oh, you stopped. So when did you stop? I told him I never was. I don't drink. So, but what was happening was that here was a person throwing something out there. I mean, I'm the person that goes to this one Italian restaurant. You know, they pour the wine, a sip of wine. I got a friend that goes with me, and he'll say, "Now, when you order the wine, get a little bit of this, a little bit of that." Now, I don't even know how the wine tastes, but he tells me a little bit of this. So when they leave the table, he got 4 little small glasses, takes my 2, poured in his 2, and he got 2 larger, sips of wine. So everybody knows me, know that I don't drink. But he just throws it out there, and all of a sudden, he wants you to start responding to something that's not true. And that's what liberals do. He couldn't answer my arguments I was putting on the post. So now, when did you stop drinking? Or it's like you go into court, when did you stop beating your wife? And if you never beat your wife, how do you respond to that? So I told them this is typical of what liberals do. They just create a narrative. It doesn't have to be true. Just throw it out there, and you're supposed to bite and act like you're responding to something that's real when they've created a false narrative and got you over here discussing a false narrative where you can't get over here and discuss the other thing, which is the real thing is who are the real racists. See, we're not having that conversation. But if you say that people are racist and they're not, if you say that the police officers are involved in racist acts and they're not, then the only racists involved in that discussion are the ones who are making the accusation. Now, I've looked at every one of the cases that they have out here, including the last 2. I looked at each one of those cases. First of all, we know that the one in which the president first came from behind his mask in July of 2009, that was a Henry Louis Gates case. You probably remember that Gates was trying to get into his own house, didn't have his keys. He was trying to jimmy the front door. Then he got a light bulb. Maybe the back door would be open, or that can get in through the back door. Somehow he got into the house, but people that were his neighbors, you would love to have neighbors like these people. You see somebody go in the house, a person not at home, you don't think the neighbor is trying to break into his own house. So you see somebody out there, it's dark, and they're trying to get into the house and seem like they are trying to force their way in there, you call the police. And if the police don't respond, then that's a problem because that's their job to respond. They think a burglary is underway, and it's a nice, neighborhood. They don't know who lives in it and the residents in it, but they know it's a nice neighborhood, Harvard University. So they went to this address in Cambridge. By this time, Henry Louis Gates is in his house. They go knock on the door, and they ask him for some ID, and then he gets bent out of shape. And he wants them to know that he ain't showing no ID. Now, they got to have some ID because if they leave and that's a burglar in that house and they came up and let that guy go, then that supervisor's going to call him in on it. That's a reprimand. If that burglar's in that house, they would knock on that door and said, the guy said, all is clear. He walks out with all his stuff, and they find the police has been there and didn't stop him, then that's a problem for them. So they're not leaving without some ID. But he's not going to show ID because he's in his house. Now, he knows that. But he should have also known as a Harvard professor that does not mean that it's comprehensive. You got to inform the person is now asking you for some identification so that he knows what you know, and not producing it and then putting up a fit because they didn't know who he was, and he's saying, do you know, you don't know who I am. Well, they found out who he was when they booked him in downtown. They found out who he was. They fingerprinted him and threw him in jail. Now, the president came, the first time we saw the president making the racism allegation was the president coming out before he had even looked at any of the evidence in the case. Didn't know there were blacks in the scene as well as whites. The arresting officer was white, but there were blacks that were there too. And that this white police officer, by the way, had done some work in terms of his sensitivity training of other police officers in the area of race. And so this guy had all kinds of bona fides that you couldn't make the racism charge against him. And so when the president said the police were acting stupidly, because it was enough evidence on the part of the president that the victim was black from Harvard University, of all places, and the police officer was white, no other information was needed, and so he comes out with a stupid comment. And that's when that mask went down for the first time, and that was in July of 2009, but it kept going down and being put back up to the point where it was coming down so often that you began to look at, when the mask was down, what is it you're looking at, where you can get a better look at the person that is there. And now the president has been totally unmasked. But I looked at all those cases, and I'll tell you something, that I did not find a single case that was racism. Let me tell you what I did on another post in terms of that, because I know a lot of you are going to tell me, what about the police officer that shot this guy in the back? Because they looped that video all over Facebook, all over YouTube. And that's an example of racism. Well, let me tell you let me tell you something about my childhood experience so I can put this in context. Because I don't see that as racism. I'll tell you why. I think it comes out of my understanding of what I was watching when I was watching those cowboy pictures. You remember how they used to have those pictures with Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and those pictures. That's back in the day. Some of you were not back there. Okay, I'll just tell you what would go on. Somebody would say, bank robbers. The sheriff run up his office, run out into the middle of the street, the robbers riding down there, and it's about maybe 10 of them. So some got to be in the back of some of the others. You can't shoot the ones in front, but the ones in back. And the sheriff's out there just firing away. Just shooting at anybody that's riding. He just knows the bank robbers. Now, one guy, the guy in the back, grabs his arm and he falls off his horse and he gets shot in the arm. Now, I'm watching this as a kid. My interpretation of that scene was, wow, the sheriff almost missed. I assume he was trying to shoot him in the back. If you run from somebody and they got a gun, because the running is so unexpected, the response to it and the reflex to it is a shoot. I don't care what it is. If they got a gun and you start running, they're going to shoot. It's almost like instinct. If they have practice, like when a person run, don't shoot. Okay, don't run, don't shoot. What's that? Hands up, don't shoot. That's what happened. That's not racism. And let me tell you why it's not racism. Because if it's racism, what does the police officer want to do? Get a more difficult shot? Why didn't he plug in when he was just standing there, stationary? He didn't shoot him because he's black. He was shooting because he shot him. Shoot him while what was sung by shotgun by Junior Walker and the All Stars. Shotgun, shoot him before he run. You see, you shoot the person before he run. If you shoot him after he run, if You shoot the person after you run, you're not shooting because he's black. If you shoot him before you run, you shoot him because he's black. They got people. John, they got people actually thinking in reverse.
When I was a kid, I always was told when you deal with the cops, if they say stop, you stop. You turn around, you face them. You make sure your hands are present. I mean, and I've had issues with the cops because I have followed the rules, and they've had them still go off on me. And so that's where my issue is. I mean, I can understand them wanting to protect themselves. I can understand that. I mean, we're all humans. We want to live, you know. But years ago, when I was a kid, you ran. You expect the guy to get shot.
Yeah.
Nowadays, oh no, well, let's face it. Now they say, well, let's see. How do you know what kind of if they have a weapon or not? How do you know that? Unless you've actually done a pat down.
And how do you know what they run into?
So I mean, as much as I dislike some of the stuff I've seen cops do, I can't say I blame them because let's face it. How do we know he's not running to get somebody else to come after them? You know, you're trying to. Maybe there's somebody in a pickup truck or another car down the road or something going to come back after you guys. I mean, you don't know. So I mean, fleeing a scene is just ridiculously stupid. Even if you're doing wrong, you're just adding to the charges. Aiding and evading or trying whatever. You're just going to add a list. I mean, you don't want a laundry list of charges they could charge you with. You try to minimize that and then have those reduced, and that's legalese.
Right, John. I'll tell you on that point. Let me answer that because I agree with everything that you just said. If you are complying with a police officer on the street, and the complying with the directive is still not working because maybe the guy's had a bad day and he's come in contact with someone else who got him thinking that this is a problem also, or he's going to create a problem. The solution is to continue to comply. You know, I had an officer, this guy was yelling and hollering, and he got loud. He tried to get me to be loud. He's going to up the ante, so to speak. He's going to raise the decibels of how the tone he's talking in. You know, as he elevated his voice, I de-elevated my voice. Because otherwise you're out there screaming, and then after you get through screaming, then what happens? So the louder he got, the quieter I got. By the end of that conversation, I was practically mumbling. Because I stayed in charge of what he was going to do. And he kept on trying to escalate. I kept on de-escalating. I kept complying. And after a while, he got frustrated. And he did some other things out there. Nothing serious. Nothing I couldn't handle. But then that Monday, I was down in the courtroom. I knew what I was going to do. I was fighting out there on the street. He didn't know it, but I was out there fighting. But look, I have two things two things I operate on. It's never failed me yet, and that is comply with those who have authority to speak in the environment where you are, and then take them to where they don't have the authority above the person you're taking it to. Everyone has a supervisor, and that includes the president. I don't think they understand that the supervisor, but they are.
Especially this current one.
and he's not, and they act like that he's their supervisor.
Everybody's like shaking their boots if they get, even if you question what he does, you're basically told you how dare you. I've had people, liberals, say he's a Harvard graduate. So I've known a few Harvard graduates. My mom's got a couple of Princeton and Harvard graduates amongst them. I've argued with them before. So why am I supposed to be intimidated by that label?
Yeah, he's a Harvard graduate. He never went to class.
Well, he's too busy being revolutionary and smoking dope, and I don't know what else he ever did. But
John, I'm not impressed with Obama. I'll be glad when he leaves. And the biggest mistake that I made in the political arena in my lifetime was voting for this guy in 2008. But you can bet your last dollar that I didn't vote for him in 2012, and I'd be glad to see him when he leaves on the 20th. A lot of my friends are saying, George, he's not even going to leave. He is going to leave. He may not want to leave. He's going to leave because as unpopular as he is, he don't leave. We're going to put him in jail. But what he's done to this country, 8 years of this, we elected him, maybe not so much the second time, but we elected him the first time without any question. And he's in there legitimately, at least during the first 4 years. The second 4, we can look at some data and maybe not. But we've accepted the election, so okay, he's in there legitimately based upon that then. But after the 2 terms are up, we have the 22nd Amendment that stands in the book. It has not been repealed. And anyone to try to stand up there for an additional term and act like you Roosevelt, and you done dug up him and reincarnated him in the White House, then that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem for anybody that tries it. Because we understand our traditions up to that point, and there's nobody, I'll tell my friends, look, I understand what you're saying, but that's not going to happen. Because even the ones who are politically asleep, and they have to have a certain segment of the population that's politically asleep, because we're all united, we're targeting and looking at the rulers. And that's what all this division is about out here in society. But when the 20th of January comes at 12 o'clock, it won't be 12:01 at 12 o'clock noon, there will be a vacating of the White House by this first family. And I'll be glad to see them go, because this has been one of the most arduous tasks we've had to suffer through the 8 years, as it would be at that time of this first family. And I will tell you something else. Everybody's talking about this woman down there in Alabama who was suspended. The comments she made were totally inappropriate, and they did the right thing suspending her, talking about she could not sympathize with 5 persons that got shot in cold blood, 12 wounded by this psychopath, and she has a problem. She made that tape on a Sunday, so she just come back from Sunday school. I don't know what she learned down there. Maybe she ought to go down to that church down there in Charleston, South Carolina, where Dylan Roof did that shooting, and listen to those people down there who he had shot people, and look at what they said. But she wasn't even involved in any kind of injury, wasn't around anybody that got shot. This is a whole different state. She's in Alabama. This incident happened in Dallas. Or look at Baton Rouge, and look in Minnesota, and the person getting killed in Dallas, and the person in Dallas have not done anything to anybody. And she's talking about she couldn't sympathize with the officers, and she was on there just so much in tears because her ethics. Let me tell you what's going on there. Her ethics did not trump her racism, and that bothered her because she wanted to see herself as a good person. Anybody that cannot empathize with somebody getting killed in cold blood, and a person kills them that did not do anything to that person who killed them, and you can't empathize with that, you don't have any ethics. There's a whole lot of things I could say, but I'm going to keep this very tight here because I got limited amount of time that's left. I need to make a couple of points to get off the air. But there are no ethics in that situation right there. But when Michelle Obama, everybody's talking about this lady down in Alabama, when Michelle Obama was at that memorial service of those those officers, I don't know if you noticed it, but when everybody know where your heart is, it's probably right in here, isn't it? How many people they think your heart is up here? Anybody think your heart is beating in your shoulders? Or do you think that one time when the two Obamas were demonstrating and protesting quietly, where they had their left hand and they had it over here like this right here, how many persons think your heart is on the right side? I mean, what biology did they have? Talking about Obama went to Harvard University. What biology class did they take when he was at Harvard University? Everybody knows the heart is over here, right? Anybody know it's not up above on your shoulder blade? Put your head on my shoulder, but if you put your heart up there, you're dead. Put your head on my... Bobby Darin. Put your head up on my shoulder. I never could sing that song. I'm going to get it right before I come to the studio, and I'm going to practice that song. She had a hand up here on her shoulder and did this a couple of times too. Did this job. She did this. Did you see her do this right here?
I didn't see that because I saw them years ago. He's just standing there without the hand in any position, standing there during the flag ceremony. And I was like, you're the president of the United States, the commander in chief of the military. You have to show some kind of decorum. You can't salute it like the military guy would raise their hand up to their the forehead area, in a smart salute, because he'd never been in the military. He's not supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. But at least he can do is stand there with his hand in the right position instead of just sitting limply by the sides of his body like they had. I mean, he has shown nothing but scorn and ridicule and just ridicule totally towards the United States and the flag. I mean, he was actually captured, him and Michelle talking. Can you believe this over a flag or a piece of cloth?
You're saying exactly what's true. These people are hostile to this country. Ann Coulter wrote an article some time ago, about a year ago, and she asked a very important question. She said, if Obama were an enemy combatant, which he is an enemy combatant, but not identified as such, certainly he's not going to say that he is, but that's all his actions say it. And she said, if he were an enemy combatant, what would Obama do differently than what he's doing right now? And the answer is that if he in fact changed sides, not that he has to change sides, just announce it. But because he's never been on this country's side. All that is masking. This president can't stand this country. And a lot of it goes back to his childhood and a lot of his woundedness, which brings up this book called Hurt People. This president has been hurt. And his woundedness is what we see being played out. And you just hope the 7 months left will play fast enough before this president does more damage to this country, because this president has been damaging this country. But we've seen nothing but scorn by this family, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. And he is leaving on the 20th, and that'll be a good thing for the nation. And when the next person stands up, in my prediction, since I'm going to Cleveland, I'm not going to Cleveland for nothing. I'm going there to try to rally along with the other persons for Donald Trump, show some color, quote unquote, at the convention, and show that this is not a white thing. This is an American thing. We have got to take this country back. And I'll tell you who we got to take it back from. We got to take this country back from the left. Because all this racism talk that we have going on right now, the only one that know that these situations are racist are those on the left. And you notice that the only ones talking about are those on the left. Bernie Sanders knows it. Hillary Clinton knows it. Who else knows it? Black Lives Matter knows it. The Black Panthers know it. Jesse Jackson know it. All these people that know it are on the left. I'll tell you who else doesn't know it. All the rest of the people. The rest of the people are picking it up because it's being repeated so much that through repetition you begin to agree with it. And in my first post today, the first piece I did, I was talking about Pavlov's dogs. The Pavlov stimulus response, conditioning. And you remember that experiment, I don't have to go through it. But when you begin to condition people, then if you tell them that what they're looking at is racism, then they will see it. But one time, you probably remember the first time that Obama got out of the blocks, he talked about that's racism, but it was proved through all the evidence that it was not racism, particularly when the blacks were getting to vouch for this guy. And then Obama fell back on his beer summit, put his mask back up, to come back another time with greater credence. The next one is that Trayvon Martin could have been his son. He couldn't have been his son. That was impossible. Because if he admits that he could have been his son, what Obama was really saying was that he had committed adultery. And I don't think Michelle will allow that. I mean, not if you admit it. If you don't know, you don't know. But to say that the construction of that statement was he could have been his son. But I have to ask you, how could he have been his son if he'd never been with Trayvon Martin's mother? I think the daddy should have objected to that, by the way. If somebody told, if I had a son and somebody told me that, let's say I'm married and I have a son, and my son gets shot, and somebody says that person could have been my son, I'm not going to have no lack of confidence and ask a question, but I'd be insulted by that because what he was saying, quite frankly, although this Harvard professor didn't understand what he was saying because he's not that bright, I don't care what they say, Obama's not that smart. And that's why everything he touches, some of it is turns to dust because that's intent, and some of it turns to dust because he can't do any better. That man doesn't have. He's talking about his legacy. He's trying to leave a legacy. Legacy of what? His legacy is division, turmoil, chaos, confusion. A $10 trillion addition added on to the national debt. That's his legacy. And that's the only thing that we're going to be able to hold on to that this president achieved. Everything he achieved was negative. But when he made that comment, I think that Trayvon's mother was being denigrated. That he could have been, Trayvon could have been my son. I think that was an insult, but he didn't intend it that way because he doesn't understand the implications of what he said. But it was intended to be inflammatory, because the public was supposed to think, if he could have been Obama's son, then that means he would have been Sasha and Malia's brother. And these are nice kids, so he must have been a nice person. This guy was a thug. But the president was planning. He tried to plan it with Gates. It didn't work. Planned it again. And over a period of 7.5 years, he's been planning this narrative. But if the country is racist, then where are the cases that show the racism there? Because all the cases they have there, none of them are racist. And if they are racist, why didn't Aaron Holder find it out?
If there's racism, then can I have, well, remember that little graph I sent you last week? You know, about there are 327,000 incidents, crimes against white people done by blacks. There's 69,000 done by whites against blacks. Mm-hmm. That's a huge number when whites are like 65% of the population, roughly.
Yes.
So, I mean, who's racist? Who's doing violent crimes against whom? Okay? That's got to be looked at, but it's not. It's like, well, then you've had liberals say, well, it's because of economic disparity. I know a lot of poor white people who never hurt anybody. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of poor blacks who never hurt anybody. It just takes a percentage, and they're probably, if you got that many crimes being committed, you know those people committing crimes are largely going to be the same people doing them over and over again.
Yes.
Acts of violence against other people. So guess what? If they're hurting whites, they're probably hurting fellow blacks. So these are bad apples. Mm. These are bad people.
John, I will tell you, I want you to listen to that tape between Malinaw and Jared Taylor. That is a very important tape. It's an hour and 19 minutes long. It's a very important tape. That's the one that this friend of mine could not stomach, because he could not accept that the data tells the story, not the narrator out here on the street. The data. And I'll quickly wrap this up. I'll just simply very fast say this in closing. When you have the amount of crimes being committed and the incarceration rate also matching the rate of the crime, let's say 30% of the crime being created by a group, and the incarceration rate matches that statistic. And you see it in the homicide rate, you see it in the rape cases and all these other cases, and the numbers match up. The crime this much, the incarceration that much. When that matches, it fundamentally then raises something that everybody is fearful of going to, and that is, if the issue is not racism, because the numbers are matching up with the amount of crime being committed by the group, then the question then that nobody wants to come to, and I'll pick this up next week because it's a very important point, and that is, it raises a question then, if it's not race, then what is it? And next week I'm going to tell you what it is, because I think we have to continue this conversation again next week as well. I'll be in Cleveland on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it. Going down as a peacemaker, and I'll be back on Monday. Don't worry about it. I'll be down there and I'll be safe, and I'll be back on Monday. Until that time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.